Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. It hasn't been a week since Izuku has been released from his small cell within juvenile detention. He had been training himself in the days after he had been placed there and brought out through a detective and pro-hero Eraserhead. He had kept up with his weight training as well as martial arts within the basement of the Bakugo home. The family had been incredibly sad when they heard that their son had actually told him to kill himself just a few days before he was arrested. Not to mention the fact that he was blamed for the death of his girlfriend Kori. Izuku never trusted any police officers after that. He would be seen training in the basement of their home in order to work out any lasting feelings he still had since Kori was cremated. Whilst he was down there, the Bakugos had been taking care of Hyoriku, as the baby was just too much for Izuku to take care of on his own. With Izuku in the basement, we can see he is punching a punching bag with a lot of emotion seen through his eyes. He kept seeing the face she had when she was dead on the ground as he stared at her, the boys who got away with her murder laughing at him the entire time, blaming him for her death as he held Hyoriku in his arms as he cried over her dead corpse. As soon as Izuku slammed his fist into the punching bag as hard as he could, a slight twinge of pain came from his wrist as he looked down at it. A small red spot there as he wringed his wrist in order to soothe the pain. Looking over at the punching bag, it had fallen off its chain laying on the ground. I really need something to put an outlet to all this anger and fury I feel right now, Izuku sighed before sitting on the ground. Pulling out a picture of Kori and her family, Izuku stared at it for a moment before his eyes started to well up. Tears dropped from his eyes on Kori in the picture as she stood next to Izuku with a smile on her face. As each one dropped on her face, causing it to slightly distort, Izuku let out a pain-filled sob as he kneeled over the picture. Holding a hand over his chest, he felt all the pain that he could ever feel in a lifetime as he let out everything he held within his heart and mind. It wouldn't be much longer before Masaru would come down into the basement to find Izuku kneeling on the ground, crying in pain and mental anguish. The older man stared at the boy for a moment, before moving in with a hesitancy in his footsteps before pulling Izuku in for a hug. A young man such as yourself shouldn't have to feel this kind of pain. Make sure that if you feel this again to tell me and Mitsuki. We may not look like it, but we know how you feel, Masaru said, as Izuku hugged him tight. Tears flowing from his eyes as he wailed in the man's arms as he begged for this all to just be some kind of dream, no nightmare that he was suffering from that he should be waking up. Later on in the day, Izuku came across the very same park that he lost his girlfriend, and as soon as he stared at the park, he moved faster to get to the beach. Hyoriku was sitting in his arms as Masaru and Mitsuki were trailing behind him attempting to give him some space. The young man had been much more into his training for UA, so that he could try and at least become a hero for both him and Kori. Once they all arrived at the beach, Izuku stared at all the trash as Hyoriku had babbled in his arms. Letting out a sigh of relief, Izuku moved towards the trash as he started to pull some of it apart and look at them closely. He moved throughout the entire trash heap before coming across a young girl who was around his age with pink hair and dreadlocks, as she cackled maniacally. Are you okay, miss?" Izuku asked, as the girl turned around. "Who are you?" she called out, before taking a closer look at him with her scope-like eyes. Izuku was entranced with the eyes as he suddenly pulled out a notebook and started to mutter about her quirk and what it could be. As it would turn out, the girl simply stared at him much closer than she would normally towards others, as it eventually centered on the baby in his arms. "Whose child is that?" she asked, as Izuku was taken from his muttering spree. "This is Hyoriku, he is my son," Izuku said, as the young woman stared at him before nodding. "What brings you to my home?" the woman asked, as Izuku blinked. I was just going to clean the beach for training to get into UA. I apologize if me going to clean this would eventually destroy your home. I will find somewhere else to do this," Izuku said, turning around to walk away. "Hey, don't worry about that. This isn't my real home. I just come here as a secondary home since I can make all the babies I can ever hope to dream," the girl said, manically. "What is your name?" Izuku asked, as the girl stared at him even more with crazed eyes. "Well, my name is Hatsume, future CEO of Hatsum Industries." "Who are you?" Mei asked as Izuku smiled. "Midoriya Izuku, soon to be Quirkless Hero," Izuku said, as May smiled at him. Quirkless hero? I can't wait to provide the kind of gear that you would need. Oh, I can just imagine the babies I can make to protect you, May said, as she vibrated from the piece of car she was sitting on. Babies? What are you talking about? Your inventions? Izuku asked, as May nodded happily. My babies are my inventions. I know my mother told me to be more aware of what I talk about when I state babies, but I can't help it. Whatever I create with my hands, they become my babies, May said, as Izuku chuckled. Well, I hope to do business with you in the future, Izuku said, holding out a hand to the girl. Well said, Midoriya-kun. Now get to cleaning. I need to continue making babies back here, May said, as Izuku brought himself and his baby where Masaru and Mitsuki could see him. Where did you go? And what is going on back there? Mitsuki questioned. There is a girl back there. She seems to be making inventions out of the trash at this beach. I can only hope that she gets into whatever school she wishes to enter, Izuku said, as he gave Mitsuki Hyoraku. All right, time to start cleaning the beach, Izuku said, before starting to move the smaller but heavier items from the trash piles. Over the next few months, Izuku just kept it cleaning the beach from all the trash, as well as gave some supplies for fixing parts and other babies that Hatsum had wanted. Their dynamic had soon become friendly, as the two would hang out whilst Mitsuki and Masaru would watch over Hyoraku for him, so he could have time to be with others his age. The two would move towards different beaches as they collected parts and pieces of broken devices and spend time together rebuilding items together. You're really good at building. Why don't you wish to become a support hero like I am? May asked, as the two had been walking away from a beach with some broken electronics. Well, ever since I was 4 years old, I had always wanted to become a hero. Even after I was diagnosed as quirkless, it was the one thing I had ever wanted to become, no matter the cost to myself. Now that I am a father, though, my time will be split between Hyoraku and my life as a hero. I can only hope that I am doing all right as a single father, Izuku said, as he muttered the last part. Well, I believe that you're doing the best you can with what you got. I may be a bit insensitive, but having a child at this point in your life was kind of dumb, May said, as Izuku glared at her playfully. Hey, it's not my fault I never knew about condoms when I was literally a year and a half into my high school years, Izuku said indignantly. As the two just glared at one another for a brief moment, the two just started to laugh before getting over their laughter. Okay, maybe I did know about that. Corey had told me at the time that it was a safe day. Didn't realize that she was lying until it was too late, Izuku said, as May guffawed at him. Well, that just means that she wanted to surprise you, May said happily. I guess so. What are you going to use these broken devices for anyway? Izuku asked, as the two entered her family's garage. Well, these are going to be for my latest baby. My Airjet jetpack made for flight, May said, with a crazy smile on her face. So you are making a replica of Airjet's jetpack? Izuku asked, as May nodded. Not all entirely the same, since it will be holding some other robotic AIs that will allow me to hack into mainframes within seconds, May said, as Izuku chuckled. Well, don't let me keep you distracted, and make sure to eat and sleep tonight. You have a test at school, remember? Izuku said, as May waved him off. Those jerks don't deserve me anyways. I'm too smart for them anyway, May called out, as Izuku left the home. As soon as he was outside, he was met with Mr. Hatsum as the man let out a sigh of happiness. Thank you for being my daughter's only friend. She doesn't get outside much before her little sister was diagnosed with cancer, Hatsum said, as Izuku nodded. It's my pleasure, sir. I had lost someone myself, and she has been kind of an anchor in my life, Izuku said, as Hatsum nodded. Just remember that if you want to be with my daughter, you have my blessing. She needs to get out of the house more often aside from making babies as she calls them, Hatsum said, leaving Izuku alone outside with a blush on his face. Even if I wanted to do that, I don't wish to sully Corey's name, Izuku muttered before walking away. Returning back to the Bakugo residence, Izuku was met with Katsuki standing in the doorway. What do you want? Izuku asked, as Katsuki glared at him. Because of you I can't go to UA anymore, but it's also because of you that I know that what I did was wrong. I won't take anything I did back, but that doesn't mean that I will still be friends with you. I am on parole and will be heading to Ketsubutsu University. They have a villain reformation program for people like myself. Don't allow yourself to die like Tatarigane did, Katsuki said, gathering his belongings. Where are you going? Izuku asked, as Katsuki glared at him. What did I just tell you, Deku? I am heading over to Ketsubutsu in order to take their villain reformation program. Just leave me alone for now and never talk to me again," Katsuki said, leaving Izuku standing at the door. "Well, at least he won't be bothering me ever again," Izuku muttered before entering the home. As soon as he saw Mitsuki and Masaru standing at the door, they softly glared at him for his words before Izuku apologized. "He was rude to you for no reason. We are sorry for glaring at you like that. He is still our son. We just wish he wasn't this rude to you," Masaru said, with a sigh. "I'm going to head to bed, not hungry at the moment," Izuku said, as Mitsuki nodded. Bringing his child with him, Izuku walked up the stairs where Katsuki's bedroom was, and saw that it was converted to a bedroom for Hyoraku. "See that, Hyo? This is your room," Izuku said, as he placed his sleeping child in the small baby crib. Turning on the baby camera, Izuku sat down on the bed next to himself as he laid down, placing his arm in the playpen where Hyoraku was sleeping. Once Izuku had completely passed out, he never felt the small hand of Hyoraku holding onto his finger as Mitsuki and Masaru had opened the door to see the adorable moment and taking a picture to forever immortalize the adorable moment between father and son. Izuku stood on top of the remaining pieces of trash from Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. He smiled as he saw the beach completely clean for the first time since his mother took him for the first time as a child. As he stood tall on top of the trash pile, an older man came up next to him on the sandy beach as he smiled at the view. Izuku looked downward to him before covering his chest and arm up with his shirt before sliding down the trash heap. The man looked eerily similar to All Might, had he decided to take away all of his muscles. Izuku stared at him for a moment, however, as he took in the man's appearance in front of him. He had long bangs that were hilariously hanging over his face that was sunken in. He was bony in appearance as his clothes barely clung to his frame. He wore a very large white shirt that basically hung on his shoulders, and green pants that he could have sworn had a small hole in the knee portion of them. His feet were covered in brown shoes that were very large for his size, but somehow managed to fit him perfectly. "You know, young man, it's rude to stare at someone for however long you've done it," the man said, a gravelly voice as he coughed slightly. "Sorry, I was just taking in your appearance. You just looked similar to someone I looked up to," Izuku said, as the man looked at him in intrigue. "Who is this person you look up to?" the man questioned, with a smile. "His name is probably known around the world as All Might. He was the only male figure in my life I looked up to. I know looking up to a hero is not a very good thing to do, but I never grew up with a father in my life. I only had my mother for about a few years before she died," Izuku said, as the man nodded. They both stayed quiet for a bit before looking at one another once more. "Who takes care of you now?" he asked. "The Bakugo family. They were close friends of my mom. I have to take care of my son, Hyoraku, cause my girlfriend had passed away," Izuku said, tears slightly coming to his eyes. "Sorry for your loss, young man. I can certainly sympathize with you in terms of losing someone you love. What was their name?" he asked. "Her name was Kazuyuki Kori. She was the first girl I fell in love with. Ironically, she was the girl who saved my life back in middle school," Izuku said, with a small smile. "I lost my mentor myself, although it was far longer than you were stating your loss," the man said, as Izuku looked to him. "What was her name?" Izuku asked, as the man smiled. "I never exactly told you they were female, but you are right. Her name was Shimura Nana, otherwise known as Pro Hero Nimbus. She was the one who told me about the fact that no matter what, that I should always smile, no matter the situation," the man said. "She sounds like someone I would have loved to have for a mentor as well. I could have used her advice when I was living through most of my school life," Izuku said, with a chuckle. "I'm sure that whatever your dreams are, kid, that you can attain them," the man said, before Izuku looked at him one last time. "What's your name, sir?" Izuku asked. "The name's Yagi Toshinori, and I certainly hope to see you grow as a person, young man," Yagi said, walking away. Izuku finished taking a shower as he fed his son Hyoraku breakfast as he left him in the hands of Mitsuki Bakugo. She smiled at him as he left the home, making his way towards UA as he thought about everything up until now in his life. He had gotten a girlfriend who liked him for who he was, even his quirkless status. He had made a new friend within a few months after her death, had a child before his girlfriend had died, and is currently raising him, and now has to prepare for the biggest test of his life. He pulled his phone out as he stared at the cracked screen showing his deceased girlfriend. Her family had moved away from Yuzutafu, so he couldn't find them anymore as they stopped contacting him. Shaking his head, he entered the place as he walked towards the large H building that housed all the students training to become the best heroes they can be. Entering the small room on the right, he began to take the written exams as he put his mind to the ultimate test. He knew that there were different types of heroes out there, and he believed that he could be a Type 2 hero, one who relied on intelligence gathering as well as thinking smarter not harder in order to defeat an opponent. He would be in the testing room for barely 2 hours before he left it feeling exhausted mentally. Izuku never thought that the written test would be so difficult for himself to complete, but he managed to pass it in his opinion. The only question that threw him off was the one pertaining to the reasons as to why heroism was now a job in the common era of quirks and superheroes. Its only question based on that information was how it came to be, and Izuku was stumped considering he had been out of school for that portion of events for lessons pertaining to it. Sitting in the auditorium without someone sitting next to him, Izuku felt himself relax as he decided to get some shut-eye before the proctor arrived. For about 50 minutes he was asleep when he felt someone moving his body slightly, causing him to shift awake from his impromptu nap. He saw a young girl looking at him in concern as he took in her appearance. She had short brown hair as well as a perma blush on her cheeks and chocolate brown eyes that made him calm down slightly. "Hey, are ye alright?" Present Mike was Abu to begin the practical portion of the exam's information dump. The girl asked, "Sorry for being asleep, just my son had kept me up all night." Izuku mumbled as he wiped his eyes. "Oh, sorry for waking you up then. I didn't know that you were catching up on some sleep." The girl shouted, "Don't worry, it's fine. I need to be awake for this part. I need to attain my dream," Izuku said, as the girl nodded. "What are your reasons for becoming a hero?" The girl asked. "To make my loved ones proud," Izuku said, as the girl nodded. Kansai accent, never seen or heard it before. Izuku thought to himself. As soon as the lights dimmed, the two became quiet as Present Mike entered the stage, and the man began to speak about the rules of the practical examination for all students from across Japan. He went over what the robots would look like as well as their point value ranging from 1 to 3 as they were gradually becoming larger based on the picture. Izuku knew that in terms of the third-pointer robots, he wouldn't be capable of landing hard hits that could break through their armor. So he had to think smarter in order to take them down, and within moments as he started to think up a plan, he mumbled out his ideas. The girl next to him looked at him with a worried expression as she had a sharp intake of air as she looked at his thinking pose. As Izuku stroked his chin about what he should do in order to take down the higher-pointed robots, he shook his head out of his reverie as a new voice called out to him. "You, with the unkempt hair." A very indignant voice called out to him. "Me?" Izuku asked dumbly as he pointed at himself. "Yes, you. Your muttering is incessantly annoying. Could you please keep it down? You are distracting the rest of us," he said, as Izuku became a blushing mess. "I apologize if my mumbling caused some distractions. I will try and get better on it," Izuku said, as Present Mike entered the conversation. Now, examinee 7111, there is no reason to call him out. He was just making plans for taking on the robots. Something you all should be doing. Now for the robot you were talking about. The last robot is more of a gimmick robot. You're not meant to fight it, more or less avoid it. Kind of like the Thwomp from Super Mario Bros. 98. Just stay out of its way, and you will be alright. Now to leave you all with some parting words. To win is not to defeat your opponent, just outwit them. Break a leg, little listeners. Present Mike called out before leaving. Izuku stretched his limbs as he prepared for the beginning part of the practical. He was thinking about how he could get a head start on those around him to take down as many robots as he could. He knew that the range of points required to get into UA, based on some information on previous years, was around at least 35 faux villain points. So he only needed to get around 40 points to be guaranteed a place in the heroics course within UA. So all he needed to do is defeat 40 different one-pointer bots so that he could be placed inside of the halls of UA. But he knew that he'd need to get higher-pointed robots just so that they could tell that he can go after larger targets. Present Mike came back again as he waited at the top of the platform near the gates as they began to open up. Izuku, taking his opportunity, had immediately run inside as Present Mike was about to speak to all of them. He did catch eye contact with the pro hero as he caught the mirthful expression on his face that held a smile that widened as he passed by the doors. He was already about a third of the way into the Beta City when he heard Present Mike calling out the student hopefuls. "And start," he yelled with enthusiasm. Nobody moved a muscle before noticing Izuku's disappearance. They then all mocked him for starting before they were told to, as they were also confused as to why Present Mike was staring at them with a mirthful expression. "What are you all waiting for? That little listener knows that you can't wait for go and heroism." Present Mike screamed out, causing them all to rush into the city. Izuku ran throughout the city as he took down multiple one-pointer bots as they came around the corner. He had soon found out about their button on the back of their necks that could turn them off, as he saved more energy, turning them off instead of breaking them. As of right now, he had around 6 points from one-pointers alone, and it had only been a minute. He was making great time for collecting points, and would have 40 within the 10-minute time frame. As he was running, he came across another one-pointer bot, who had a two-pointer bot with him, as Izuku ran some interference before jumping into the air. The two-pointer bot had pointed their rubber bullet Gatling gun at him as he landed in front of the one-pointer bot as the two-pointer gunned it down. Using the smoke from the gun of the second pointer, he rushed around it and landed on its back before slamming his hand on the power button. "All right, 9 points. I need around 31 more until I am accepted in," Izuku said as he moved on. For the next 8 minutes of the trials, he would jump around and defeat one-pointer bots before he would stop another from attacking a spare examinee. They would either state their thanks or get angry at him for stealing their kill, claiming that they had it handled. But overall, Izuku was making out like a king in terms of points. He had around 30 points scratch that make that 32 since he just now defeated a two-pointer bot. He was just 3 points shy of reaching the goal to getting into UA, and he was ecstatic. He could make it. He was just turning around the corner when he was entering the main street of the Beta City he was in. Student hopefuls all around him had taken down robots so quickly that he couldn't find one to destroy or turn off. But he decided to focus his time on keeping his peers from overextending themselves on some of the gimmickier robots. Soon enough, however, the zero-pointer made their appearance as they towered over the entire city. They stood at around 9 stories in height as Izuku made sure to keep everyone out of its way. But when he began to look around for any stragglers, he heard someone let out a scream of agony. "Kaya! Someone, save me!" A feminine voice called out. Izuku looked at the students running around and watched as none of them went to save her. Growling to himself, he picked his pace up as he ran towards the girl as he noticed her predicament. She was covered in rubble that seemingly hurt her left leg as he reached under the edge of the rubble, holding her down. "Don't worry, miss. I will pull this up and you move out from under it, all right?" Izuku said, as the girl gave a grunt of affirmation. Izuku pulled with all his strength as he lifted the rubble as hard as he could. The girl managed to barely get out from under it when he dropped it as he wringed his hands before picking her up and carrying her on his back. Running as fast as he could, he watched as the giant robot was closing in on them faster than he was running. It would only be a matter of time before it caught up to the two of them and placed them back in the same position as they were before. But just as Izuku had tossed her out of the way as the zero-pointer had taken notice of their position, it reached down to punch them. Izuku placed his arms out in an X formation to protect the girl from any further damage. But just as the hand of the robot was right in front of them, a voice called out. "And that's time. Make sure to head home and rest before the results are sent to your homes. Plus, Ultra." Present Mix's voice called out. Izuku fell to his knees as he let out a massive breath he was holding in. His entire body was trembling with slight fear as he took in massive quantities of air and slowly tried to lower his heart rate. Once he took his time on that department, he sat down next to the girl he'd saved as she smiled at him. They sat in silence as both thought about their own results on the test they took in order to join the heroics course. "Hey, thank you for saving me. I wouldn't have made it if it weren't for you," the girl said as Izuku smiled. "Name's Midoriya, Izuku." "Nice to meet you," Izuku said, pausing for her name. "Oh, sorry, my name is Uraraka Ochako." "Nice to meet you, Midoriya-kun. What was your score, by the way?" Uraraka asked, with a smile. "It was around at least 32 points before I went to save you and keep others out of the rubble's way that the zero-pointer threw." "What about you?" Izuku said, as the girl looked thoughtful. "I reached around 37 points if I remember correctly. It feels so nice to be able to destroy robots for an exam." "What is your quirk, by the way?" Uraraka asked, as Izuku gained a sad expression. "I'm quirkless, I just turned the robots I came across off. Or I turned them against one another. I just hope that I get points for that. Izuku muttered. Well, I think that we need a quirkless hero. It will mean that heroes are people as well, Uraraka said, with a smile. Izuku smiled at Uraraka before she asked him for his number, to which Izuku blushed a bit before handing it over. When asking why she wanted it, she blushed slightly before stating that she'd like to have a friend within Mizutofu, since she's new to the area. That was something that Izuku needed a lot of, and Izuku smiled before giving it over. Recovery Girl had also appeared and kissed Uraraka to get her healed before moving on to Izuku, who was minorly damaged because of getting hit by robots for other contestants. Once he was gone, however, the brown-haired girl would head onto the internet to find out what quirkless meant and what happened to most of them. She would find a very dangerous statistic around them, something that will not be revealed in this chapter. The week after the whole entrance exams, Izuku was physically training himself to be better than he was previously. He had been thinking about whatever happened during the whole entrance exams as a whole. He was happy that he knew that he may be getting into general education. His whole plan was to help others when he could and get as many points as possible. But since he was not really high on the score, he was beginning to get antsy with how he wasn't able to get into the 40s in terms of overall points. Sighing, he left the basement and entered the living room where his son Hyoriko was bouncing in his little bouncy chair as he babbled at the television. Hey Hyo, how are you doing? Izuku asked, picking up the baby boy. Bubu Labra. The baby babbled. I know. Let's get you something to eat before we get anything else done for the day, Izuku said, as he moved towards the kitchen. Morning, brat. How was your morning training? Mitsuki asked, looking over her shoulder. It's been fine, getting a little antsy at the moment since I haven't received the letter yet, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head. He moved towards the fridge as he pulled out a small sippy cup for Hyoriko and moved back to the table and poured a couple handfuls of Cheerios. As Hyoriko had been babbling and happily slapping his little high chair, Izuku looked out the window as he thought about his past building up to now. He smiled to himself as he thought about everything that had happened to him before a flash of Kori appeared in front of him with blood pouring out of her mouth. She had only appeared for a microsecond, but it was enough to cause the boy to slightly hitch in his breath before shaking his head. Mitsuki had noticed the boy's change in breath as she looked at him. She watched as he shook his head before going back to fixing up breakfast for the boy and her husband. Sitting down at the table, she smirked at Izuku before pulling out a small red-letter envelope and sliding it across the table at him. Well, you're in luck, kid. Open it up and show us what happened, Mitsuki said, with a smile. You had it. I can't wait to see what's inside, Izuku said, opening the envelope. A hologram projector disc? Masaru asked, as he entered the kitchen. I am here. As a projection, All Might's voice called out. All Might. Izuku mumbled. Hello, young Midoriya, and I am happy to inform you that you passed the written part of the exam with flying colors. I am so happy to see some smarter hero hopefuls coming in. We really need more of those. But that is beside the point. What we're really here for is the number of points you got on the practical, All Might said, showing scenes behind himself of Izuku taking down robots. Okay, that makes sense, but why are you showing me taking down robots? Izuku mumbled out again as Mitsuki patted his head to keep him paying attention. As much as I would love to inform you that you got enough points to pass the exam, I'm sorry to say that 32 faux villain points will not be enough to pass. You were 8 points off from being accepted into the heroics course. But it is enough to reach into general education, All Might said, a slightly saddened expression taking over his face. I guess that was bound to happen, Izuku muttered, as Hyoriko looked at Izuku in worry. That is if the faux villain points were all we were looking for, All Might said, causing Izuku to look back at the man confused. In a previous life, I was once an entertainer. Now look at this imagery, All Might said, pointing at the screen behind him showing the girl he'd saved. Excuse me, Mr. Present Mike, a brown bob haircut girl asked, pulling on the hero's sleeve. What's up, little listener? The man asked. Can you give some of my points to that green-haired boy? You know, the one who looked kind of plain and had freckles in the shape of diamonds? The girl asked. That's the girl who I saved in the rubble. Izuku thought to himself worriedly. For every action, there is a reaction, as Newton once said. All Might said, as the girl's voice spoke out again. Please. He needs to have the points to get into the hero course. He saved my life. The girl pleaded. Don't worry, little listener. He got enough points on his own to make it into the heroics course, Mike said, causing Izuku to look confused. For your actions of saving young Uraraka from the zero-pointer, we who interviewed the entrance exams footage grant you Midoriya Izuku 60 rescue points, bringing your grand total from 32 points up to 92 total points and placing you in first. Congratulations, young Midoriya, and welcome to your Hero Academia, All Might said with a smile. Before the disc was showing a small countdown, the hero looked at Izuku with slightly more happiness, as well as many other emotions covering his expression. He then seemingly transformed in front of everyone who was watching the disc as the man spoke again. For those who are looking at this, even you young Midoriya, you are achieving a dream that I couldn't when I was your age. Don't make any mistakes, and you will manage to become the world's first quirkless hero. Although please don't tell anyone about this form. It would be very bad if people found out that the #1 hero looks like Jack Skellington from that Halloween movie. Hee, the man said, with a smile. The new school year was in swing, and Izuku was heading down the sidewalk as he prepared himself for the year where he'd have to be away from his son for a long time. Shaking his head, he looked down at the baby boy in his arms as he walked through the pathways heading towards the school itself. By the time he arrived at the gates of the school, he found himself accosted by the security detail of the school. They stared at him for a second before questioning him on whether or not the baby was really his or not. And with a small certificate of showing that the baby was in fact his own, they allowed him and his child entry. But not without having him head straight to the principal's office to tell them about his situation. Now here he was standing in front of the principal's office, whilst Hyoraku was babbling in his arms nervously. Knocking on the door lightly, Izuku heard the door pull open, revealing a tall man with black hair, as well as a small figure sitting at the desk. What are you doing here? And aren't you a little young to be a father? The man asked monotonously. Well, I have the certificate if you want to know, sir, Izuku said, as the man shook his head. Illogical. Why would you bring a newborn into the school grounds? He questioned. That's why I came here, Izuku stated, as the man nodded. Well, at least some new students are logical enough to come here. I will meet you in your class. You will be in class 1A. See you within a few minutes, the man said, walking away. Come in, Mr. Midoriya. I believe that we have some things to talk about, the principal asked, as Izuku nodded. Entering the room, Izuku was surrounded by the presence and aura of the principal as he was smiling at him. Sitting down, Izuku looked around the room before a small bouncy chair had appeared in the room courtesy of the principal. Looking at the diminutive principal for a second, Izuku placed Hyoraku into the seat and made sure that the baby was comfortable. I must say, having a student enter my school whilst also being a father, that is not something many can say about their lives, the principal said, happily. I'm sorry for the short notice, sir, but I wanted to know if there was a daycare system that the school uses so I wouldn't have to be too far from Hyoraku, Izuku said, as the principal nodded. There have been times when students have gotten pregnant and given birth in our halls. We have dedicated a small daycare area for the children over the last few years. It hasn't been used in a while, so it's nice to have it be used once again, the principal said, with a smile. This isn't going without me giving you something, is it? Izuku asked, as the principal smirked. Yes. Now tell me what you're good at, and I might make it worth your while to keep the baby here on campus whilst you are doing school projects, the principal said, as Izuku nodded. The only thing that comes to mind is the fact that I have this, Izuku said, pulling out a small notebook. It was not really that big, but it held a name for it that caused the principal to gain a mirthful expression. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 15. Well, if I didn't know any better, you should probably have another 14 volumes of this book, correct? Niza questioned. Yeah, I don't really get enough time to make more volumes. Because of Hyoraku, his attention is the one thing that I want to really pay any kind of attention to, Izuku said, as Niza nodded. Well, far be it from me to keep a father away from their son. You are aware that you have a record on your file, correct? Nizu inquired as Izuku bristled at the information. I thought that I was exonerated from that, Izuku muttered, slightly angry. Any and all records that are placed on your name are kept forever, young man. Now do you have anything to say about that record? Niza questioned. Look, I know that what that says is something that is around a year old. But whatever it stated about me, I didn't kill Corey. She was my girlfriend. And the real culprit was placed behind bars. I have to be a single dad because of her death, and I haven't gotten over it, Izuku said, looking at the ground, tears streaming. I wasn't implying that you were her murderer. On the contrary, I was thinking about putting you into therapy so that you can get over her death sooner rather than later. Nizu said, as he looked into Izuku's confused eyes. Why? I was doing fine without one. Izuku said, as Nizu shook his head. Any kind of therapy is something that a hero needs at one point in their life. A strong hero is one who can accept the fact that they need help from the aid of a therapist. And who knows, you might heal much better than you would on your own. Nizu said, as Izuku nodded. I will give it a try, but can it wait until after a week of me being here? Izuku asked, as the principal nodded. That I can do. Leave the boy with me. You should really be heading to class right about now. Nizu said, as Izuku stood up. Izuku walked over to Hyoriku with a smile and pulled the baby into a hug as Hyoriku hugged Izuku back. Once he was done, he placed the baby into the bouncy chair as Nizu left his desk and started to give him attention so that Izuku could leave the room. As Izuku walked down the halls of the school, Izuku soon found himself outside of Class 1A, and he entered the room. He soon found that everyone looked over at him with confusion before the indigo-haired young man walked over to him robotically. Hello there. I am Ida Tenya, and I come from Semi-Private Academy. It's nice to meet you, Ida said, as Izuku nervously rubbed the back of his head. Nice to meet you, Ida-san. Sorry about what happened at the auditorium the other day, Izuku said, as Ida shook his head. I should be apologizing. What I did was more distracting than your muttering. Even thought it was quite loud for me to hear it, Ida said, as Izuku shook his head. He moved to sit down in his assigned seat as he prepared for the lesson plan to begin. The girl who Izuku had rescued in the entrance exams had entered the room and found him as well, and she gave him a hello before going to her seat. Once the last few students arrived, moments later whilst the class were paying more attention to talking to one another, Izuku felt the hairs on his neck grow, causing him to look at the door. Finding no one, he looked higher first before going lower, finding nothing on top, but something on the bottom. A yellow sleeping bag was laying on the ground as a familiar face was shown looking at the entire class. The face recognized Izuku staring at him before giving a brief nod, causing Izuku to look away and forwards. If you all came here to converse with one another and make friends, then you should leave now. The man spoke, causing everyone to look at him and worry. My name is Aizawa Shota, and I am going to be your homeroom teacher for the year. Nice to meet you all. Now if you all have the time, follow the brochure to the changing rooms and meet me outside at Gym Alpha. We are going to be taking part in a Quirk apprehension test, Aizawa said, leaving the class. Izuku stood up and walked over to the packages of gym uniforms as he looked at the packaging. They weren't really up to code considering the fact that they had sweat on them. Shivering slightly, he moved out of the classroom as he made his way towards the changing room. Once entering the changing room, he found another set of gym uniforms that were his size and put them on. Looking at his classmates who were doing the same, Izuku took off his shirt and overcoat and quickly changed. He was out the door before the last student could arrive in the changing room to change their clothing. Making his way out towards the training field, Izuku was the first out of the boys to arrive there as most of the girls were standing waiting. Once the rest of both the girls and boys arrived on the field, they all overheard Aizawa mutter about how they should be faster. Before all of that was done, Izuku stood off to the side as Aizawa asked for one of them to step up towards him for their first test. The ball throw. He told the student to use their quirk this time after hearing how far they could throw it without the use of their quirk before they stepped into the circle. As they threw the ball, Izuku was impressed with how their quirk worked as he kept to himself and stayed quiet. He eventually was called upon for using his quirk in order to take the first test of the day as he got into the circle. As he pulled his arm back and threw, he felt as though someone was watching him from afar. And as the ball flew through the air, Izuku turned his head to look at their teacher as the man was openly glaring at him. His hair floated in the air as Izuku took notice of the man's now red iris as they stared at his form with something close to scrutiny. Is there a reason as to why you are trying to erase something that isn't their eraser head? Izuku questioned as he turned away from the man. You got into the hero course through strength that is not of a strength-enhancing quirk. Although the records state that you're quirkless, can you tell me how you managed to get into this school? Aizawa questioned, causing the other students to look at Izuku in shock. Wait, he's quirkless? A short boy called out. That's so manly. A red-haired boy said, smiling. Revelry in the dark. A bird-headed boy muttered. I just turned off the robots with the button on the nape of their necks. That's all. Izuku said, as Aizawa nodded. Just making sure that you didn't use a strength quirk, Aizawa said, before moving on. Over the course of the early morning, Izuku managed to get better scores on average than most of the other classmates of his. He knew that because of his quirklessness, he would not be taken seriously. That is why he planned on having some weaponry be a part of his hero's suit. And as the tests got harder and harder, Izuku did take notice of a particular student who wasn't really doing well on the tests but was paying more attention to his female classmates. Now Izuku was a very compassionate person. Some would say that he'd be compassionate to people who didn't deserve it. Cough Bakugo. Cough. But seeing the boy keep on leering at his female classmates made Izuku move over to him in order to see what his deal was. As soon as he stood next to the boy with purple ball on his head, Izuku spoke to him whilst not actually looking at him. So any reason as to why you are currently leering at our female companions? Izuku asked, causing the boy to yelp and jump away. What? Why are you here? The boy asked. Answer the question. It might bring you to have someone to help you with your problem, Izuku said, as they moved on to the next test. I don't have a problem. All the cool guys get the girls when they look at them. I mean, look at her. She's extremely hot, and she is just giving me the mean eye because she's just at Tsundere, the boy said, as Izuku shook his head. She's giving you that look because you're leering at her. Something that she feels uncomfortable in you doing right about now, Izuku said, causing the boy to look at him. What makes you think that you'd be any better than I am? I unlike you have a quirk, the boy said, as Izuku nodded. Yeah, that is true. You have a quirk, but are you a father? Izuku questioned, causing the boy to look at him. Don't tell me, the boy said, as Izuku nodded. I am indeed a father, and I spend my time with my son so that he can become a productive member of society. He's currently a year old at this point in time, Izuku said, as he focused on doing push-ups. How did you lose your virginity already? The boy exclaimed as he did his own push-ups. It was more of an accident. My late girlfriend was not wearing protection or wasn't on the pill and was having a baby, Izuku said, as he continued his push-ups. The time went on as the two conversed with one another about what one should do as a man towards his female compatriots. Izuku informed the boy that if he really wanted to get a girl to like him, he should really stop giving lewd comments as well as leer at them. He should really be giving them compliments about what kind of people they are, as well as how hard they work to get into this school. By the time the tests were over, Aizawa was standing next to a large billboard that was on the ground. I'm not going to go over each and every one of your scores. It would take too much time, and people could die if I do that. So I am just going to show you all the scores altogether. The ranks within this class are not entirely based on your quirk and how well you were able to use them on these tests. They are meant for me to get a read on how well you can use them already, Aizawa said, showing the test results. 1. Yaoyorozu Momo 11. Kodakoji. 2. Todoroki Shoto 12. Sato Rikido. 3. Ida Tenya 13. Azuitsu. 4. Midoriya Izuku. 14. Aoyama Yuga. 5. Tokoyami Fumikage 15. Shiro Hanta. 6. Shoji Mizo 16. Kaminari Denki. 7. Ojiro Mashireo 17. Jiro Kyoka. 8. Kirishima Ijiro 18. Hagakure Toru. 9. Ashido Mina 19. Mineta Minoru. 10. Uraraka Ochako 20. Shinso Hitoshi. As the students looked at their teacher for his words, they watched as he walked away as if nothing was going to happen. And when they were leaving, the teacher turned to look at them with a slight glare as he looked to the diminutive boy who was near Izuku. You are on thin ice, Mineta. If I hear anything about you leering at your female classmates, you are going to be placed in general studies. Now get back to the classroom to gather your syllabi and head home. I got a patrol to get on to later in an hour, Aizawa said, walking down the hall. When the students returned back to the classroom, they gathered their supplies and prepared to head home. But out of all of them, they noticed how Izuku strayed to be by himself as he walked out of the classroom with his school supplies. As Izuku walked down the hall, he rounded a corner as he looked at the daycare area where children from a range between 1 to elementary school were playing. Entering the room, Izuku walked over to the boy who looked eerily similar to him, had it not been for their blue hair and one blue eye. Picking the baby up, Izuku bade his farewells to the person in charge before heading outside of the room to find himself being stared at by 19 pairs of eyes. Holy cow! I didn't think you were telling the truth to the perv during the tests. A short purple-haired girl said, as Izuku glared at her. Yeah, I was telling the truth. Why would I ever lie? I have no reason to do that. This is my 1-year-old son, Hyoraku. He is the son between me and my late girlfriend. Izuku said, as the baby babbled in his arms. As most of the girls cooed at the baby boy in Izuku's arms, one of the boys looked at Izuku with a concerned expression on his face as he walked up to him. He looked Izuku right in the eyes as he began to speak to him. Are you sure that you can take care of a baby whilst learning at this esteemed school? Shouldn't you be focused on raising such a child? The boy who got third asked, Ida, if Izuku remembered correctly. I've done well so far. All I need to do is make sure that taking care of Hyoraku doesn't get in the way of my classes. Izuku said, as he began to walk away. Hey, can we go with you? A girl asked, as Izuku turned to look at her. She had brown hair that was short in a bob cut style. She had a permanent blush on her cheeks and warm chocolate brown eyes that Izuku immediately relaxed in as he nodded. As she and Izuku walked away from the school, the two began to talk about what life was like before UA. Izuku told her about his late girlfriend who had been killed in a bullying incident. When the girl asked if she could know the girl's name, Izuku shook his head. He told her that he didn't want to be reminded of her name so soon after her death, and the girl stayed quiet until they reached the tram. The two gave their farewells as they both headed home for the evening. The next day, Izuku entered the school as he headed over to the support department. He got here early so that he could have some kind of equipment for his hero suit that he could use for a future class. He had been preparing for a class where he had battle training, and he had trained himself in multiple basic martial arts forms that he got from HeroTube. They were very awe-inspiring as Izuku incorporated them into his very own fighting style fit for quirkless combat. He arrived at the door to the support department as he prepared to knock on the door. But as soon as his hand was about to touch it, the door exploded outwards as he was knocked off his feet and onto his back. Although during the fall, Izuku remembered something falling on top of him as he caught whoever was blasted through the door and on top of him. As the smoke cleared up and Izuku was looking up at whoever was on top of him, he found his face nearly in the cleavage of another girl. He immediately helped the girl off of him and away from her chest as she happily took his hand. Hello there. I'm Hatsume. Nice to meet you, the girl said, with a manic expression on her face. God damn it, Hatsum. How many times do I have to tell you to stop with those explosions? Power Loader called out as he rushed through the black smoke of the room. Sorry, Power Loader. You and I both know, however, that I can't let that happen. Explosions mean something is wrong and that there is something to fix, Hatsum said, as Izuku chuckled. What brings you here, young man? I'm sure that you shouldn't be here before school hours. Power Loader questioned as he looked at Izuku through his excavator helmet. It's fine. I was just dropping off my son. But I wanted to get some early equipment for me to use if there was a battle exercise class today, Izuku said, as Power Loader just shook his head. Well, at least you're the first one to ask us. What are we working with? Power Loader questioned as Hatsum bounced nearby as a mere glance caught something else bouncing. I only wanted some equipment that would increase my versatility in battle. Something like a weapon of sorts, or at least multiple weapons that I can use if I lose one, Izuku said, as Power Loader nodded. Hatsum can help you with that. She's the fastest builder I have in this room. You can follow her to her desk and give her your designs, Power Loader said, as Izuku gave him his hero suit info. As soon as the man left the two alone, Hatsum had brought Izuku over to her many devices, things she called her babies. When Izuku found out that Hatsum had called her inventions her babies, Izuku knew that he found a like-minded individual when it came to taking care of items. And for an hour they talked about what kinds of weapons Izuku could use to make up for his quirkless diagnosis. And once their talk was over, he was leaving with her, telling him that she'd have all the items he requested by the time his final class of the day happened. Entering through the sliding door of the classroom, Izuku sat down at his seat as he waited for the teachers to come and go throughout the day. And indeed, they did. As over the 10 hours he had for school, many different teachers came and went with their specialized way of teaching the class. Present Mike was first, with him being very energetic when it came to English. Then it was Ectoplasm, who was creating clones for whoever needed assistance for modern science. Midnight was very flirtatious with the class as she taught modern hero art history. Cementos was very informative during their modern art literature. Snipe had taught them all about geographical history, before finally the last teacher of the day was for Hero Informatics. When the students were preparing for their final class, they'd already had lunch, with Lunch Rush being the one to make their lunches. To which Izuku had decided to get a pork cutlet bowl, which he called katsudon. It was almost as good as how his mother had made it in the past for him that he'd nearly cried when he took his first bite. But that was for later, as the class were waiting for their foundational heroics teacher to arrive. Stomping could be heard in the hall as they all looked to the door, as surprisingly, All Might himself was pulling the sliding door open with massive force that it nearly broke. "I am here, coming through the door like a normal person," All Might said, as the entire class went up in hysterics. "I know that you all want to learn from me, but I need to inform you all about what kind of class you will be undertaking," All Might said, as he pulled a small card from his pocket. As they all looked at the card, they noticed that it had only stated 2 words on it: Battle Training. Today's lesson will be Inside Heroics, where there will be 2 teams between heroes and villains. Think of it like the little game you'd play as children, but on a much harder and time-crunching level. And you all are going to need something to look the part of a hero, bringing in your hero suits. A hero cannot be seen without them. Meet me at Gym Alpha for further notice," All Might said, as he rushed off into the distance. Izuku walked over to the suitcase that had his number on it before he left the room in a slight hurry. He had originally made his costume to appear similar to All Might, with the tufts of a hood covering the top of his head resembling All Might's tufts of hair. But he changed that to make them appear as bunny ears to make it more child-friendly. Stupid hero suit laws. But when he entered the changing room, he took off his clothing and took a quick shower, since he'd implemented a heated clothing style that allowed him to change the temperature of his hero suit based on any kind of weather outside. The first set of his suit was a full-body suit that was made from carbon nanofibers, as well as an unknown metal alloy to make the entire suit. And it was a full-body suit that he'd need to climb into just so that it could be used. It came with a thermal temperature gauge that he could change at any time. It had a hood that resembled a mask and covered his eyes, with a small compartment of his face having a voice modulator that worked as a gas mask. His legs were covered in slight armor as they protected his knees plus ankles, before his feet were covered in armoring. They weren't uncomfortable, but just enough armor plating to make his attacks hurt. On his back were multiple weapons that were allowed for him to utilize since he'd trained in them before UA. One was a massive staff that was made from titanium and carbon nanofibers like his hero suit. But because of the titanium, it was really lightweight and could pull apart to be turned into batons. They were also really good at conducting electricity, and his bodysuit was filled with rubber parts so that he could tank electric quirks. And to finally finish his hero suit, he had used contacts to change his eye color from their emerald look to be a mix of red and black. Placing one last item over his shoulders, he looked at himself in the mirror that was inside the changing room as he smirked to himself. It was perfect. He really looked the part of an underground hero to the letter. He just now had to leave the room and head to Gym Alpha, which brought up his new question. Where in the world is Gym Alpha? Izuku muttered as he walked outside the UA building.